ladies and gentlemen, I have some stuff for you in the line of Nietzsche, or Nietzschean thinking. I want to start off with two quick quotes from Thus Spake Zarathustra. Then I'm going to read you a piece I read the other night, which I wrote 11 or 12 years ago. And I thought it was pretty good, and I want to read you the two quotes here to sort of set the mood or stage, or to set the, how shall I say, the motif or something like that. I love him who wants to create over and beyond himself, and thus perishes. Okay, so the idea of struggle with sort of clash or something, very, very difficult situation, which may even lead to complete catastrophic failure. Or perhaps that's not failure, to perish on a large struggle. That's the point. And you must wish to consume yourself in your own flame. How could you wish to become new unless you had first become ashes? Pretty good one there. Now, Nietzsche talks about giants in this wonderful book, and he said also, I would believe only in a God who could dance. Now, when I read this toward the end of high school, back when I was about 17 or so, it took over my mind for a little while. I was very, very fascinated with the poeticism of it. So I'm going to read you something called And God Danced. It's only about 2 pages long, and it's highly metaphorical, and a lot of it can't be concretized. A lot of it's just poetical. It's not poetry, it's not a poem, it's just poetical. It is said that in any generation there will be 3 great men. As these 3 are above their peers, so will there be 2 or 3 great men in a century, who dwarf the great men of each of the several generations in their century, and so goes for the millennium and mankind. Where do these great men come from? Some from homes of the rich and privileged, such as Aristotle, a giant among mankind. Some from the underprivileged, such as Andrew Carnegie, a giant of his century, and all positions in the between. And what is the mark of these giants? From whence flows their motive power? Verily, I reveal to you, their goal is their own war. What cause do they seek? What end to attain? But to this they have deaf ears. The good war hallows their cause, and they make warriors of themselves, and pain marks their ascent. But the war, and all it entails, is their goal. If I pause for a second, you see the motif of pain and struggle, and Nietzsche's got a slightly dark view of life in that way, and I was fascinated by that. I don't think it's valuable in the long term, but it is a fascinating, especially when a youngster happens upon it for the first time. So I wasn't new to Nietzsche with this book, but I was new to the extremely poetic and powerful metaphorical way of his storytelling about Zarathustra. Giants do not feel pain except in the absence of their war. All else is struggle and victory. Boredom is not their lot, but be wary of a giant with no war, for angst of the most severe sort mars his disposition. He will cast about until he can find the means to begin a new war, and the giant never lacks motion. Pause again for just a second. Leonardo da Vinci said, men of true genius, when they are inactive, they are doing the most. And I did a video on leisure where I mentioned the guy who painted the Sistine Chapel, and some run-ins he had because he just used to sit around and stare at stuff. But anyways, so a giant never lacks motion, but sometimes he's casting about looking for a new war. But do not offer a struggle to a giant. He must always find his own. Okay? I don't know if that's so true, that you have to find your own struggle, but this is going along with Nietzsche's idea of being a complete individual, and everything is the whole universe is focused on you. Existentialism. So he has to find his own war. If you are no giant, your judgment of a worthy struggle will be unworthy of a giant's struggle. And if you be a giant, offer not struggle nor war to your brother. Make his struggle your war, and a struggle among giants is an awesome sight, but too rare. The giant is his own greatest enemy to defeat. This too is an awesome battle, seldom with a victor, never with a defeated. Interesting thought, if a giant fights himself, no one loses. Whatever war the giant aims to fight, he needs armies of labor, and slaves for the machine which is his energy. His soul needs its fuel. And what makes the best slave? The strongest among the many, and the strongest is a giant. So for his war he has to enslave giants. But giants do not enslave one another. So who's he going to enslave? He has to enslave himself. The giant's war is the hardest end he can find to pursue. To enslave another giant would be a feat to rank among the galaxy's greatest battles. But to enslave oneself is the war of all wars. And this war a giant seeks above all others. The effort needed for the wars the giant enters reaches beyond the divine. It lays in the realm to be known as self-obedience. Nothing is greater nor more difficult to achieve than this goal, and it is always the giant's final aim, the battle which lasts through all the great wars that he fights. Victory may come and come again, but the battle to enslave oneself is an incredible struggle. The slave must work towards his master's chosen goal without regard for his energy or ability to achieve it. If it requires his last bit of energy, where he would have long ago stopped were he allowed to choose, then so be it. If the master holds the whip firmly enough, the slave will struggle unto death, but not relent his task. Now remember, he's enslaved himself. He's not driving an actual slave. However, his greatest struggle, chosen by his master, can't defeat him, for the enslaved self cannot die without permission. In this way, when the giant enslaves itself, monumental feats are to follow. But if the slave revolts, the slave of a self-conquered giant is self-contained and cannot flee. You have enslaved yourself, but the slave grows wary. The greatest feat of all is to gain this slave's leash. You have done that much, but cannot make your slave to labor. Bring the whip. If labor flow not from the slave in rivers of struggle and torrent of effort, then bring it about with rivers of blood and torrent of pain. Now, again, pretty dark and gloomy view, but it's metaphorical and poetic. For the slave to overcome his master is the giant's death. But this does not happen to giants. The giant's goal is his own war, and to revolt against his own war would bring a fury of self-inflicted discipline. And never again could such a revolt occur. But these revolts don't occur, for struggle is joy, and the giant loves its joy. You say that a good cause hallows even war? The giant sees the good war to hallow any cause. And the war is the goal of the giant's wars. Now, good war hallows any cause is straight out of here. But either victory or defeat must arrive eventually, and so a new war is sought. And through his wars of great struggle and magnificent pain, the giant grows blind toward the small. Battles take a squint to see, but events are become invisible. And it is dark among the lack of war, so the giant climbs for the sunlight. Now here we would enter the last stage or phase of this little piece. So he's now going to climb towards the sunlight because he's out of wars to fight.